We're here for World of Outlaws Sprint Car Racing, the Super Nationals, on this 1 mile dirt track. And Larry, it's quite a unique racetrack.
Bob, it really is, and I think the reason why it's so unique is that, like so many miles around the country, originally it was not built to race cars on, it was built to race horses on. And in particular, a very unusual and a very dangerous thing occurs on this track as you come out of turn number 2. It gets very, very narrow. If the cars were placed side by side, you could only run 4 abreast down the backstretch, but at speeds well above 100 miles an hour, and particularly in a sprint car when you're broad sliding, that's not enough room to really do racing.
The best sprint car drivers from all over the nation are here. Earlier in qualifying, Sammy Swindell set a new world's record for a 1 mile dirt track. By the way, you'll be able to see that run a little bit later in our show.
Well, he went better than 128 miles per hour. And it's really unfortunate because no matter how good the coverage is, I don't think there's any way to really show how fast 128 miles per hour average speed is on dirt. The speeds have to be approaching 155 miles per hour on the straightaways, and believe me, Swindell's speed here is absolutely incredible.
The main race will be run in 2 segments. There won't be a whole lot of pit activity, but there will be a lot of it when the red flag comes out and the cars come in for more fuel and a change of tires. To cover that action for us, the editor of Stock Car Racing magazine, Dick Bergeron.
There will be only one pit stop during the race today. At the halfway point, the starter will drop the red flag, and all the competitors will come to the pits. They'll all take on a full load of fuel. Many of them will take on a full set of tires as well. Some will even change the rear-end gear ratio in their race cars. Anybody who makes a pit stop beyond that one almost certainly has no chance to win the race. It'll be a very important pit stop. The decisions that are made there will determine how fast the various cars will go in the second half of the event, the most important half by far.
Thank you, Dick. We'll be back for the start of our action here at Syracuse, New York in just a moment. As he was strapped into his race car just before being pushed off. Sammy the pole sitter here today for the Super Nationals at New York State Fairground in Syracuse. And the 41 cars that will make up this race are on the track. Here is the starting lineup. In the front row will be car number 1 in, driven by Sammy Swindell from Bartlett, Tennessee. Outside, car 75, Doug Wolfgang. In row number 2, Jeff Swindell, car 1A, and Bobby Allen outside of row 2 rather, also in car 1A. In the third row, car 80W, driven by Dave Wickham, and 28D, Brad Doty. In the fourth row, car number 11, Steve Kinzer, and 3B, George Bischoff. Starting in 9th position, Kenny Jacobs in car 63, alongside Bobby Davis Jr., car 29. Then car number 66S, driven by Steve Smith, and 57, Steve Yodock. In the 7th row, car 5W, Randy Wolf, 70, Doug Stambaugh. In the 8th row, Paul Lotier and Shane Carson. In the 9th row, Danny Smith and Jack Hewitt. Row number 10 consists of Keith Kaufman and Scott Tobias. In row number 11, Barry Camp and Rick Ferkel. In the 12th row, Van May and Bobby Weaver.
Bob, you can really see how tight that back chute is when they're in this just 4 abreast formation that is just for exhibition stake before the start of the race.
Sammy Beavers and Kevin Collins in the 13th row. 14th row, Brian Seidel and Bobby Wilkins. Row number 15 consists of Scott Osherman and Jim Nace. In the 16th row, Jim Horton and Chris Criswell. Row number 17, Lee Osborne and Ron Schumann. In the 18th row, Ron Semelka and Ed Thompson. Row number 19, Smokey Snellbaker and Rick Unger. In the 20th row, Paul Klein and Johnny Bieber. And all alone in the 21st row, car number 75W, driven by Ed Wiley, as the cars come down the front straightaway, making their way into turn number 1. They now go back into 2 abreast formation for the start of the race.
41 cars. We're looking at one of the starters right there, one of the rows of starters. Let's talk a little bit about Brad Doty, the yellow number 28. He turned in a great performance here a year ago. He started deep in the pack, and he came up to finish 6th. Probably the finest passing performance of the 1981 race.
The pace car has pulled to the inside track as the field moves into turn number 3 now. Sammy Swindell alongside Doug Wolfgang. Car number 1 in and 75. The pace begins to quicken. They come out of turn number 4 looking for a green flag, and the green is out. The Syracuse Super Nationals underway. This is a 33-lap event. Then we will stop the race, refuel, and go 30 more.
Well, the big fear here on a track like this with 41 starters is something happening in the middle of the pack in one of these early laps. After about 1 or 2 laps, the field will string out. But right in the middle of the backstretch on laps 1, 2, and 3, if something were to occur irregular, there is the potential here for a great crash.
Everything looks good at this point. Everybody through 1 and 2 smoothly, and everybody also moving through turns 3 and 4. The leader is Sammy Swindell. Second position belongs to Doug Wolfgang. In third position is Bobby Allen, and running in fourth place, Brad Doty.
Well, the wings on these super sprint cars really make the cars stable, and a lot of professional drivers in this field, as one of them, Randy Wolf, who crashed here severely a few years ago, has slowed going down the backstretch into turn number 3. Wolf was running about in 12th or 13th position at the time. The field is filing by on the high side.
And 2 laps now been completed. Sammy Swindell with now that advantage of almost a half a straightaway. As you can see him moving down the backstretch.
We've had a spin in turn number 2, a yellow flag.
And a car is stalled on the high side of the racetrack.
I believe it's Doug Stambaugh, the Eastern Pennsylvania driver, one of the recent generation of sprint car racers. Stambaugh surfacing in the mid-1970s, running that primarily the Williams Grove, Seelings Grove circuit, as Brad Doty's car begins to spew forth a lot of smoke as Doty comes down the front stretch. Swindell, of course, jumping out into what appeared to be a very easy lead here in the early going. We've already lost Randy Wolf, who pulled in. Now Doty is smoking heavily, so this 1-mile track here at Syracuse beginning to take the toll on these 500, maybe 600 horsepower sprint cars.
There is Sammy Swindell, our leader at this point. Now these laps that are run under the yellow do not count. Only green laps will be counting in the 33-lap first portion of this race. Sammy Swindell has been leading all the way. Doug Wolfgang runs in second position. In third is Jeff Swindell. Fourth place belongs to Brad Doty, and we'll be counting him down below position number 4 as they come by us here on the main straightaway. The pace car leading them through turn number 4 as the car of Doug Stambaugh is removed from the racetrack. Doug from Hanover, Pennsylvania, bring out our first caution period of the day.
And Randy Wolf, whom we had talked about earlier, he was here on a free ticket. He was the guaranteed starter from Williams Grove, and the racetrack even sponsored his trip here, but Wolf is out of it, or at least apparently so already. He sits in the pit area, and this year a change in the scoring, Bob. The caution flag laps do not count. So this caution flag, which came out for Stambaugh, a man whom Wolf has raced against many, many times, may have helped Randy. Randy's coming back out onto the racetrack. So Randy Wolf, we believe, did not lose a lap, and he's back out on the speedway.
Brad Doty, car number 28, is running in fourth position right now, but we have noticed some smoke coming from that car. Brad is from Katanning, Pennsylvania. Right now in fourth position. We'll be watching that car to see if those problems continue for him. We have noticed some smoke coming from that race car.
Bob, I want to go back to a comment I made during that brief green flag period. I think I used the word great in relationship to the potential of what could happen in the early laps. I want to assure everybody that the use of the word great is the magnitude of what could happen, not certainly the positive use of the word great. Without a doubt, it's a very negative situation for something to occur in the early stages of the race.
And they come by the main grandstand once again, and the official starter gives them the white flag, indicating that next time around they will go back to racing. Running in fifth position is Bobby Allen at this time. In sixth place is car number 80, driven by Dave Wickham, and then the number 3B, driven by George Bishop.
And if there is a surprise among the really front runners, as Randy Wolf again pulls into the infield area, so Wolf does not have his problem solved yet. If there's a surprise among the really front runners, at least at this stage, it would have to be Bishop. Most of the other names up front are pretty familiar and very predictable. George has had a good season, but I don't think a whole lot of folks expected him to be quite so high here at the racetrack on the 1 mile. Bishop has won 15 times this year. He's had a great season. Without a doubt, he is one of the most improved drivers in all of sprint car racing in 1982.
Green flag is back out as Sammy Swindell blasts out of turn number 4, heads down the main straightaway. So we're back to racing after a brief yellow caution period for the stall car of Doug Stambaugh in turn number 1. Down the backstretch once again, Sammy Swindell continues to lead. We look back and look at the rest of the pack as it moves safely through turns 1 and 2. Sammy Swindell already into turn number 3. Broadsliding that sprint car off of the turn onto the main straightaway. This is the completion of lap number 4. Sammy Swindell from Bartlett, Tennessee. And Larry, we mentioned during the World of Outlaws sprint car race that we covered in Odessa, Missouri, you'll notice an orange ring that is on the tires on these race cars, the back tires. We might explain what that's all about.
Well, that's a rim extender. These tires on these sprint cars are very, very huge that are on the particular right rear wheels of the sprint cars. They're huge and they're also heavy. They run as low a air pressure as they possibly can to give the cars a better bite. And all this combines to have the effect of trying to rip the tire off of the wheel. And those rim extenders just give a little more security and keep the tires on the wheel a little better.
Another car that's smoking, at least as it comes down the straightaway, is Steve Kinzer in car number 11. Car we're watching right now, he's running in 7th position, and we noticed that after he was pushed off originally, he came in for a check of the race car by his crew, so perhaps a mechanical problem with that car, number 11, driven by Steve Kinzer. Meanwhile, the leader continues to be Sammy Swindell, car number 1. He's moving down the backstretch with about still a quarter or a half a straightaway lead on Doug Wolfgang, and we have completed 6 laps.
Swindell has been the leader of the World of Outlaw point standings for the vast majority of this season. He has won 14 times on the World of Outlaw trails and other sanctioned events. He's won an additional 4. So altogether, Swindell, within the major sanctioning sprint car bodies, has won 18 times. We have another car slowing now, going down the backstretch, and that is
Steve Kinzer, the driver we talked about just a few minutes ago. We noticed the car smoking on him. Now it's moving very slowly down the backstretch on the inside, and if he cannot make it to a point that he can pull off of the racetrack, this will necessitate a yellow, and that is indeed the situation. The yellow flag comes out once again for the second time for the stall car of Steve Kinzer, number 11. So Steve Kinzer's hopes of winning here this afternoon have been dashed, and the relatively bad season for Steve Kinzer is continuing.
Yeah, relatively. He's won like 13 times in World of Outlaw competition, and yes, that is an off season for Steve. With the other sanctioning bodies, namely USAC and All-Star, you add up all those wins, it comes up to 24. But compared to seasons past, when Kinzer was winning upwards to 40 features a year, in the last 3 years, for instance, in just World of Outlaw competition alone, he's won over 20 times each time. It is an off season for Steve Kinzer.
Well, we have several cars that have pulled into the pits for a check of their problems, in addition to Steve Kinzer, who's being pulled off of the backstretch. We'll get a handle on those and return with more racing from Syracuse, New York in a moment.
Kaufman, who started in 19th position, has moved up to 9th. This was the super car in the East of 1982, a car that Lynn Paxton took to 19 features. Kaufman picked up the ride for this weekend, and Keith Kaufman, a former fast qualifier here, appears to be on the move. We have a spin almost in turn number 2. They straighten it up. It looked like Jackie Hewitt deep in the pack, but everybody's running good again.
All right, and Jeff Swindell continues to demonstrate his superiority on this racetrack, as he has led all the way and is managing to keep the interval between himself and second place Doug Wolfgang about a quarter to a half a straightaway. Let's go to Dick Berggren.
Brandoni, you're one of the first guys out. What happened? I say you're one of the first men out. What happened to your car?
Well, we just sprung an oil leak somewhere. We haven't found it yet. It just started blowing all the oil out. Got where I couldn't see, and I saw his oil on the racetrack, and I just pulled in.
What's the racetrack like right now?
It's getting faster. I felt like we were going to be okay. I just trying to run with him. The racetrack's coming in.